covers 2012 spending for agriculture, commerce, justice, science, transportation, and housing programs, and a continuing resolution to keep the other programs funded through mid-December while Congress completes work on spending bills. Now live Senate coverage here on C-SPAN 2.
The Senate will come to order. The chaplain, Dr. Barry Black, will lead the Senate in prayer.
Let us pray. Eternal God, let your peace that passes understanding be felt on Capitol Hill. Remove distracting priorities from the minds of our senators, leading them to focus on the things that really matter. Take away disturbing doubts, providing them with certitude regarding your providential power and purpose. Eradicate false ambition as you make them content to serve you where they are and as they are. In a special way, guide the Super Committee in its challenging work. And Lord, as we enter a season of gratitude, make us truly thankful. We pray in your strong name. Amen.
Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance to our flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The clerk will read a communication to the Senate.
Washington, D.C., November 17, 2011. To the Senate. Under the provisions of Rule 1, Paragraph 3 of the Standing Rules of the Senate, I hereby appoint the Honorable Tom Udall, a Senator from the State of New Mexico, to perform the duties of the Chair. Signed, Daniel K. Inouye, President Pro Tempore.
Majority Leader is recognized.
Following leader remarks, the Senate will be in morning business for 1 hour. The Republicans will control the first half, and the majority will control the final half. Following that morning business, the Senate will begin consideration of S. 1867, the Department of Defense Authorization Bill. We expect to receive the conference report to accompany H.R. 2112, the Agriculture, CGS, and Transportation Appropriation Bill, which also contains the CR during today's session. The information I've gotten from the House, and it could change, is it will be late. I've spoken to Senator Levin earlier today. It appears we'll have to be in session to try to work through some of that bill anyway tomorrow. So we may not be able to complete the conference report and the continuing resolution today. We'll see what develops as the day goes on. This week, the nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office, known as the watchdog of the Senate, confirmed that Democrats have been saying what they've confirmed what we've been saying for months, that the so-called Republicans' jobs plan isn't much of a plan and it wouldn't create any jobs. The Congressional Budget Office report analyzed different approaches to spurring economic growth and creating jobs proposed by both parties. Among the top job creators were Democratic proposals to extend unemployment benefits and cut middle-class taxes. When the CBO looked at the GOP plan to eliminate safeguards that protect lives, save money, and shield the environment, it concluded the idea was a flop. The study concluded that the effects of the changes the Republicans proposed would be negligible at best, and at worst could actually lower economic growth and slow hiring. Although their plan would have no positive effect on our economy, Republicans want to gut the safeguards that saved hundreds of thousands of lives just last year alone. And although their plan could potentially slow economic growth, they want to gut the safeguards that save American companies and consumers $1.3 trillion each year by increasing productivity and reducing medical bills. Nonpartisan experts agree this is not the road to recovery. They also agree with Democrats that putting money back in the pockets of middle-class families and small businesses through tax credits and refunds, by extending unemployment benefits, is the most efficient way to get Americans working again and turn our economy around. Families that have more money to spend will pump it back into the economy. Businesses that have more money to spend will hire new workers. And at a time when we need to conserve every dollar and get the most bang for the buck, these proposals do more with less. As we continue to discuss ways to combat high unemployment in coming months, it would behoove my Republican colleagues to remember that not all proposals are created equal. When we consider our next jobs bill in December, our Republican friends will once again face a choice. They can cling to ideological proposals we know won't work, or they can join forces with Democrats to pass proposals we know will create jobs. I hope the Republicans, Mr. President, prove to be more interested in getting results than in getting their way.
President. Republican leaders recognized.
Over the past few weeks, I've repeatedly come to the floor to highlight the good work Republicans in the House have been doing in identifying jobs legislation that the two parties can actually agree on. At last count, House Republicans had passed 22 jobs bills that were designed not only to incentivize the private sector to create jobs, but which were also designed to attract strong bipartisan support. In other words, House Republicans have been designing jobs legislation that could actually pass. They've been legislating with an eye toward making a difference instead of just making a point. And so I've been encouraging the Democratic majority here in the Senate to follow the House's lead, take up these bipartisan jobs bills, pass them here in the Senate, and send them to the President for signature. That way we'd actually be helping to create jobs, and we'd send a message to the American people that we can actually do something many of them think we don't do enough of around here, and that's work together. So this morning I'd like to call on my Democratic colleagues once again to take me up on the offer. Once we get back from Thanksgiving, let's take up these bipartisan bills that have already passed the House, pass them here in the Senate, and send them down to the President for a signature. We've showed we could do it last week when we worked together to pass Senator Brown's 3% withholding bill and Senator Murray's Veterans Bill. In fact, yesterday, the House passed this legislation 422 to nothing, sending it to the White House for the President's signature. So I'd like to call on the President this morning to invite Senator Brown down to the White House for the signing ceremony, which would show the American people that cooperation is indeed possible when the Senate focuses on bipartisan job creation solutions. So let's continue to build off the momentum and do more. Many of the bipartisan House-passed bills already have companion or similar legislation here in the Senate. There's no reason we can't start to take them up as soon as we get back. There's a lot we could do. Yesterday, I highlighted a bill by Senator Collins, the EPA Regulatory Relief Act. It's got strong support from both Republicans and Democrats right here in the Senate, including 12 Democratic co-sponsors. Let's pass it. The House-passed version of this bill passed overwhelmingly. It got more than 40 Democratic votes. It's supported by more than 300 business groups, including the American Forest and Paper Association, the National Association of Manufacturing, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, the National Federation of Independent Business, and the Business Roundtable. According to one estimate, this bill could save more than 200,000 jobs and provide greater certainty for businesses that are asking us for it. The EPA has asked for more time. Both parties support it. Let's pass it. And then once we pass that bill, we should take up the 4 other bipartisan House-passed bills I highlighted last week. These 4 bills would help businesses raise capital, expand their businesses, and create more jobs. They all passed with bipartisan support over in the House. We've got bipartisan companion or similar legislation right here in the Senate. What's the holdup? Let's pass these bills too. There's the Small Company Capital Formation Act, co-sponsored by Senators Tester and Toomey. Its companion legislation got 183 Democratic votes in the House. Let's pass it. There's the Community Bank Resource Improvement Act, co-sponsored by Senator Hutchison and Pryor. Its companion legislation in the House got 184 Democrats. Let's take it up and pass it. There's the Private Company Flexibility and Growth Act, co-sponsored by Senators Toomey and Carper. Let's pass it. There's the Democratizing Access to Capital Act, sponsored by Senator Scott Brown. A similar bill in the House passed with 407 votes, including 169 Democrats. Let's pass it. There's the Access to Capital for Job Creators Act, co-sponsored by Senator Thune. It passed the House with 413 votes, including 175 Democrats. Let's pass it. And we shouldn't stop there. As I see it, there's no reason we shouldn't take up every one of these bipartisan bills that have already passed the House once we get back and pass them one by one. They all pass the House on a bipartisan basis. They'll help the private sector create jobs. There's no good reason we shouldn't take all these bills up and pass them right here in the Senate. Because if we can't pass jobs legislation that we all agree on, then what are we going to pass? This should be a layup. The Republican House has done its job. It's time for the Senate to act. Let's do what the American people expect us to do. Let's take up these jobs bill when we return, pass them, and send them down to the President for a signature. Let's do the work we were sent here to do. Mr. President, I yield the floor.
Under the previous order, the leadership time is reserved. Under the previous order, the Senate will be in a period of morning business for 1 hour, with senators permitted to speak therein for up to 10 minutes each, with the time equally divided and controlled between the two leaders or their designees, with the Republicans controlling the first half and the majority controlling the final half. Alabama is recognized.
I would ask that the quorum call.
There is currently no quorum call. The Senate's in session.
I thank the President. Once again, we find ourselves in a too familiar position. Secret meetings over the financial future of our country are being held as we head toward the final hours, really final minutes, has been the pattern around here, of an agreement that will be produced for us and expected to be passed by a committee of 12. It's less than a week until the deadline and no language has been made public. And the American people should be able to make their voice heard before the committee votes, because the truth is, once that vote happens, there'll be no opportunity to change their product. It'll be up or down. The train will have left the station, and the bill will hopefully, or maybe, will be a good bill that can pass, but we won't have any opportunity to amend it. That's not the way Congress was set up to work. I just happened to catch this morning a statement by former Secretary of Defense under President Bush and President Obama, Robert Gates, and this is a statement he made in an interview. I think, frankly, the creation of this super committee was a complete abdication of responsibility on the part of Congress. It basically says, this is too hard for us. Give us a BRAC. Give us a package where all I have to do is vote it up or vote it down, and I don't have to take any personal responsibility for the tough decisions. So now we're left with this sword of Damocles hanging over the government, hanging over defense, and if these cuts are automatically made, I think the results for our national security will be a catastrophe. That's what the former Secretary of Defense said recently. Admiral Mullen, when asked about this in response to a question I asked him at the Armed Services Committee, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs said, quote, if this sequester takes place, it has a good chance of breaking us and putting us in a position not to keep faith with this all-volunteer force that has fought 2 wars. It will impose a heavy penalty on developing equipment for the future. It will hollow us out, close quote. So one of the reasons I'm here this morning is to issue a warning and call attention to some matters that I believe are important. People will make many promises about what this deal will be about if it passes and they reach an agreement. Hopefully they'll reach an agreement that's one that can be honestly defended and we'll all be happy to vote for. But what we've seen so far indicates that secret deals, while they remain secret, are promoted to be far better than they are when you begin to see what's really in them. The devil will always be in the details. Yesterday on the floor I spoke about the Budget Control Act's disaster funding gimmick. Over 10 years, the cumulative cost of this gimmick will be about $140 billion to the Treasury, including interest. And just a few words tucked into a bill, and people didn't understand that disaster gimmick. It came out at the 11th hour into the final agreement, and people voted on it without fully understanding what it meant. So just a few words can dramatically alter the future fiscal situation of our country. And the record of broken promises is long, improvident promises about what a bill would do. Many deals have been proposed that have promised serious spending cuts and minimal tax increases, only for the reverse to be actually true. Let me run down a brief list. The President's budget he submitted earlier this year, he said, quote, it does not add to our debt. Clearly one of the most dramatic, erroneous, blatantly false statements ever issued by a President of the United States. The reality is that that budget would double the debt of the United States in 10 years. That budget would have as its lowest single annual deficit, according to CBO, an annual deficit, a deficit of $740 billion, with deficits in the years 8, 9, and 10 up to $1 trillion again. It increased spending, it increased taxes, and it increased the debt more than if we'd done nothing, the President's budget did. Then the Senate Democrats talked about a budget I called a phantom budget. We haven't had one in the Senate for 932 days, so they talked about a budget. And they made some claims. We never saw it in detail, never saw the details, but they claimed it had $2 trillion in spending cuts and $2 trillion in tax hikes, $1 of tax hikes for every $1 of spending cuts. The President earlier this year acknowledged that you should have $3 of spending cuts for every $1 of tax increases. Of course, that's been abandoned now. But the reality was that that phantom budget that was talked about but never produced, but an outline was produced, actually had, we think, $2 in tax hikes for every $1 in spending cut. And then Senator Reid, during the effort to raise the debt limit, his revised proposal claimed a $2.4 trillion in deficit reduction. And the reality was that they were counting $1.1 trillion in savings from war cost, because the CBO assumes the war cost will be the same for 10 years. But it was never going to be the same for 10 years. We're always going to bring the war cost down as soon as we possibly could. This a phony claim that you've cut $1 million in spending and reduced spending $1 trillion, excuse me, by claiming credit for war costs that we are on a steadfast path and have been to reduce. The President's super committee proposal that he submitted to this committee of 12 claims $2 in cuts for every $1 in taxes. But the reality is we see it, and there's no real cuts, and 100% of the reduction will come from taxes, more spending, more debt so far. So if this committee proposes a solution and asks us to vote for it, here's some things that we should look for and not be happy with if they're in the bill. The pattern has been, I just would say, for the promoters of these agreements to spin them to sound better than they really are. One of the things we should look out for are claims of spending reductions that occur by setting a cap on war spending, as I indicated. The money was never going to be spent. Some are claiming $1 trillion in savings from that. That should not be counted. Another thing we would look at are front-loaded promises, front-loaded revenue increases, tax increases that occur now, along with back-loaded promises of spending cuts in the future, in the out years. And then they claim these savings. But the pattern around here is that once a tax increase is passed, it's there. But a promise of a spending cut in the future very often does not become a reality. We know that. That's the pattern that's put us in such a desperate financial condition today. Just that kind of activity. So whatever happens this time, this cannot be part of the process. We need to watch for a plan that would rely on directions to standing committees in the House and Senate to, at some point in the future, produce legislations that might reduce entitlement spending and or would raise revenue. These committees have not followed through on that in the past, and the super committee's directions to them, we have to know, are not likely to occur based on history around here. That's the historic reality. Just directing a committee to raise taxes or cut spending does not at all mean that they're going to do it. Another thing we need to watch out for is if the committee makes unrealistic cuts to programs without reforming those programs, like the current assumed annual cuts that are in law today to health care providers, doctors, and hospitals, to cut their reimbursement rates. Congress knows we can't go forward with those cuts, and they've been avoided every year by finding money, borrowing money to pay to avoid very serious cuts to our providers that indeed, if not paid, they'll quit doing Medicare and Medicaid work. Doctors don't have to do that. And it's just at a point you can't cut providers anymore. Another thing we need to watch out for is a plan that assumes unrealistic changes to the Congressional Budget Office baseline. One of the things is to assert a overly optimistic economic growth projections for the next 10 years. More and more we're hearing that coming out of this recession is going to be a long, tough, slow slog. And if you want to spend more money and you claim you've got a budget that improves our financial situation, one way to do it is just assume more growth than is actually going to occur, that the experts don't believe will actually occur. If you do that, that's phony accounting. It may look, your numbers may look better today, but not as the years go by. And that's the kind of thinking that's got us in the deep debt hole we're in today. Another thing to watch out for is the claim that interest savings derived from tax increases by reducing the deficit are a spending cut. Interest expense, and it's substantial for our country, interest expense is a byproduct of spending and taxes. If you drive up debt, your interest payment will go up. If you raise taxes and reduce the deficit, then interest rates drop. You can't count the interest reduction as a spending cut. That's not cutting any real spending. That's just avoiding a future interest growth that would have occurred if you haven't done it. So I don't think we should count, and we must not count, interest reductions, either from tax increases or spending cuts, really, as a spending cut. I'd also like to talk about the defense cuts briefly. Majority Leader Reid said this just yesterday, I believe it was, quote, if this committee, the super committee, fails to act, sequestration, that is automatic cuts, are going to go forward, he says, quote, Democrats are not going to take an unfair, unrealistic load directed toward domestic discretionary spending and take it away from the military. In other words, take the cuts away from the military, the automatic cuts that would fall on the military, which are, as Admiral Mullen, the current chairman of the Joint Chiefs, said, will hollow us out. These automatic cuts are odd. They protect from any cuts the surging food stamp program. Any cuts are prohibited against the Medicaid program. But the Defense Department, which has already taken $489 billion in cuts, is facing another $600 billion in cuts. It would be a 20% net reduction in defense over the next 10 years. I mean from current spending levels, not projected increases. It would be the most severe hammering of the Defense Department while protecting other programs from any cuts. It is not legitimate. Yet the majority leader is pushing back and saying this is perfectly legitimate, and he's not going to have cuts in discretionary spending. He wants them to fall on the military. Majority leader's comments suggest that defense increases have increased faster than domestic discretionary spending, but nothing could be further from the truth. From fiscal year 2008 through 2011, defense budget increased base budget by just 10%, and only 84% over 10 years, while education spending surged 67% in the last 2008 through 2011.
Minority time has expired.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent to have one additional moment.
Without objection.
Mr. President, we're at a historic point. I believe that this Congress has taken a great risk in turning over to a committee of 12 this responsibility. It's going to be difficult for them to reach an agreement. If they don't, damaging sequestration could occur. If they do reach an agreement, we've got to be sure it's an honest agreement that actually achieves what they promise, which is at a minimum of $1.1 trillion in deficit reduction. We really need $4 trillion, as every expert has said, over 10 years in savings to begin to put this country on the right path. We're nowhere close to that. And I really feel like that the country is going to have to take some tough medicine. Hope the committee can help us get there. I do not approve of the process, but hopefully it'll work, and maybe we won't repeat it in the future. I thank the chair and would yield the floor.
Mr. President.
The senator from Rhode Island.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Mr. President, I rise today to underscore a crucial challenge facing our nation. 14 million Americans are looking for work. 6 million have been unemployed for more than 6 months, and the average length of unemployment is 40 weeks, the longest average in more than 60 years. These are dire circumstances. They must be changed, and we know how to do it. We know how to address our immediate unemployment crisis. We must enact policies that will put Americans back to work and strengthen our economy. And Congress can start by passing the Americans Jobs Act. The American Jobs Act is a blueprint for boosting our economy. It contains policies that most Americans and virtually all economists agree government should do in order to help our economy grow. It would provide relief to the middle class. It would help small businesses grow and hire. It would invest in our nation's bridges and roads and schools, help stabilize our housing market, and provide aid to states so that teachers and first responders can stay on their jobs. And Congress must also renew basic policies such as federal unemployment compensation programs that have been a lifeline to the unemployed, their families, businesses, and to states and economies throughout this nation. If we do not extend unemployment benefits by the end of the year, 2 million Americans will lose their benefits by February 2012. This would be disastrous for them, for local businesses that depend upon people being able to still go and get a cup of coffee or go out and buy the essentials of life, states who depend on, again, that type of economic activity in our national economy. And this is why I joined several of my colleagues to introduce the Emergency Unemployment Compensation Extension Act of 2011. If federal support for unemployment benefits is not extended, the economy could lose $72 billion in economic activity, endangering up to 560,000 jobs nationwide. And in my state, the estimate would be 2,300 jobs could be lost, simply because we will shrink again demand as people who are relying on just getting by with an unemployment check no longer even have those few dollars to get by on. These proposals should be nonpartisan. In the past, indeed, they've garnered both Democratic and Republican support. Unfortunately, in the midst of the deepest and longest unemployment crisis our nation has faced since the Great Depression, too many of my Republican colleagues have chosen simply to delay and to deny the reality of millions of Americans who are looking for work, underemployed, struggling just to get by day to day. In January 2008, before the economic crisis took hold, the unemployment rate was 5%. It ultimately peaked at 10.1% nationally in October of 2009. This massive, sudden drop in employment was precipitated by one of the worst financial crises we've ever seen in the history of the country. This crisis was caused by excessive risk-taking by financial institutions, lax regulation, and in the minds of so many Americans, in so many cases, just out-and-out greed. Since that 10.1% high of unemployment in October 2009, the unemployment rate has trended downward, but not fast enough. The national unemployment rate has hovered around 9% since January of this year. The fact that remains that the economy is generating more jobs than it was under the policies of President Bush, particularly in the last year of his administration. But it's still not generating enough jobs. And as we saw with the most recent unemployment report, businesses are hiring, despite some strong headwinds, particularly the economic dangers from Europe. In October, the economy added 80,000 jobs, and the unemployment rate came down from 9.1% to 9%. That is the right direction, but not the right speed, not the right momentum, not the right response to this crisis. The economy still has 6.6 million fewer jobs than at the beginning of the 2007 recession. And the rate of job growth is just, as I said, simply just too slow. Adding 80,000 jobs keeps us a bit afloat, but it doesn't allow us to have the momentum to move the economy forward, which we need. If we continue to see sluggish job growth with an average 125,000 payroll jobs added per month, and that's the pace this year, it'll take us an additional 52 months, not weeks, 52 months, just to get back to the pre-recession levels of payroll employment. If we pick up job growth, say to 200,000 jobs per month, which is, again, exceeding the current pace, but not the kind of spectacular pace we need, it still will take an additional 33 months to get back to pre-Bush recession levels employment. This persistently high unemployment rate, the anemic growth, has correctly been described as a national crisis. But more important than the finding of economists and those who are studying the policy effects of this is the damage that this crisis is inflicting upon the families and communities of America. Combined with the fact that middle-class families have not seen a real increase in their family income in 10 years, and now they've seen this fantastic unemployment, this is a double whammy. At the same time, some essentials like food and fuel become more expensive. We cannot, I think, overstate the difficulty that so many families are seeing. 10 years effectively without any real growth in their income, increased prices in essentials, and a job market that is weak at best, although slightly improving. And that's why what we have to do here is literally get Americans back to work, to give them not only the resources but the confidence that the days ahead will be much better. And this crisis requires our full attention of Congress and action, not just discussion. We cannot afford further inaction. We cannot again indulge in a period of time where we were borrowing to pay for two major conflicts. I note my predecessor from Alabama was talking about the military budget. We have fought, since 2001, two major conflicts in Iraq and Afghanistan, and we have not raised the revenue to support those efforts. We put them on the backs of future generations of Americans and the backs of Americans today who are facing this job crisis. We've got to work, to put people to work, to end this crisis. Unfortunately, I fear that, as I've said before, many of my Republican colleagues are simply engaged in delay, which might be politically expedient, but it's not helping the families of America. Economists, those who are studying this economy, both national and international, have been emphatic that we have to put policies in place to get people back to work. And many of these policies are encapsulated in the American Jobs Act, which has been repeatedly rejected by my colleagues on the other side. They voted down two parts of the bill that we pulled out. One, the Teachers and First Responders Back to Work Act, that would have created or protected 40,000 education jobs, kept thousands of police and firefighters on the job, helped local communities struggle as they are struggling to keep afloat. And they also rejected the Rebuild America Jobs Act, which would have made an immediate investment of $50 billion in our highways, transit systems, railways, and aviation infrastructure. And frankly, I don't know any American in any part of this country that does not get the idea that we have to begin and continue to reinvest in our infrastructure. Every American can point to a bridge that's failing. They can point to congestion on the highways. They can point to projects that are just so necessary, not only for the long-term productivity of the country, but for the immediate employment of their neighbors. And the rejection of these efforts was based on one simple fact, that we are asking the wealthiest Americans to pay for these initiatives. No longer are we going to put it on the backs of future generations as we have a decade of foreign conflicts and other programs like the Medicare Part D expansion. We're trying to be fiscally responsible, not only to propose ways to put people to work, but also to pay for those measures now. And that is what my colleagues objected. Now, they seem to be more concerned about that 1% that's talked about than the rest of America that needs work, not just directly, but their community needs to work so that they can prosper along with their neighbors. All of this delay has been accompanied by their proposals, but their proposals seem to rely upon austerity. We'll just have to cut more and more and more. But this single-minded focus on austerity, I don't think is going to lead to the kind of growth we need. In fact, there are many analysts and economists who argue that austerity measures as being suggested are counterproductive to growing the economy, that in fact they lead to higher unemployment and lower wages. For example, a recent IMF study talking about the consequences of pursuing an agenda focused on austerity found that an austerity program that curbs the deficit by 1% of GDP, reduces real incomes by about 0.6%, and raises unemployment by 0.5%. So the notion that we can simply cut our way to employment growth is not substantiated by, I think, fair-minded analysis. For example, again, Gus Forcher of Moody Analytics examined the most recent proposal offered by my colleagues, Senator McCain and Paul, and said the Republican proposal wouldn't address the cause of the current weakness in the short term, and that, in fact, it would be harmful. The Congressional Budget Office has looked at a broad range of policies from both parties and have concluded that reducing taxes on business income and repatriation of foreign income are the most ineffective and inefficient tools for growing jobs, and yet these two measures seem to lead the list of the proposals on the other side of the aisle. And that the idea of providing more tax breaks to corporations and the wealthy will create jobs is not supported by the record. Bush-era tax breaks for the wealthiest resulted in mediocre growth for our economy and declining wages for the middle class over the period 2001 to 2008, 2009. Instead of bringing forth or supporting issues that will actually put Americans to work, my colleagues on this side just want to reframe the issue. They want to talk about burdensome regulations. And this argument doesn't stand up also. Since 2007,
the senator has used 10 minutes.
I would request unanimous consent for an additional 2 minutes. Let me conclude by making a point which I think is very important, because this notion of just simply striking away all the regulations and we'll have this miraculous growth in employment is not substantiated by careful analysis. Since 2007, the Bureau of Labor Statistics has tracked reasons behind mass layoffs. Let's reduce our employment force. Among the reasons an employer can cite for layoffs is, quote, government regulation. The data shows that government regulation accounted for a minuscule 0.2% of layoffs. These are the managers and leaders of these companies checking the box as to what's causing them to lay off people. Instead, employers cite a lack of demand as a reason for 39% of the layoffs from 2008 to 2010. Indeed, if regulations are driving unemployment, you would expect to see job losses and high employment rates in sectors of the economy where regulation has increased, like the financial service sector. However, in the financial service sector, the unemployment rate is much lower than the national average. In fact, it's at 5.8%. And meanwhile, domestic financial firms have posted extraordinary record profits in the first 2 quarters of 2011. And so this notion that wiping away regulations is going to miraculously solve our problems is not substantiated by the evidence that we are collecting. What we need to do is put people back to work. The programs and the American Jobs Act will do that. Mr. President, I would hope that that would be recognized, accepted, and we can move quickly to pass it. And with that, Mr. President, I would yield the floor.
Mr. President.
The Senator from Ohio.
Thank you, Mr. President. I asked Mr. to speak up to 10 minutes as if in morning business.
Without objection.
Thank you. Mr. President, I first of all appreciate Senator Reid's comments about, the state of this economy and what the supercommittee is doing and the direction we need to go on all of these tax issues and all of these spending issues. He's so right. Mr. President, we know several things about Social Security. We know it's been around for 75 years. We know that if we do things right here, it will be around for another 75 years. We know that it makes a huge difference in the lives of our citizens and our constituents in Oregon and Ohio and Rhode Island and all over this country. We know that about more than half of people in my state get more than half of their income, or more than half of seniors in my state who are on Social Security get more than half their income from Social Security, and it plays such an important role in their lives. We also know, Mr. President, that until recently, there was not a cost of living adjustment for seniors. So that over the last 2 years, even though the President and the majority in the Senate, the Democrats in the Senate and the House, voted a $250 one-time payment to seniors to help them deal with the increase in cost of their health care, except for that, Mr. President, we know that Social Security beneficiaries in this country didn't get a cost of living adjustment for 2 years. And we also know, Mr. President, and the presiding officer from Oregon is working with Senator Mikulski from Maryland and me on legislation to fix this. We also know that the cost of living adjustment is pure and simple understated, because the cost of living adjustment that seniors usually get never quite enough to keep up with their expenses, but it's based on the cost of living for a working person, for someone in his 50s or 40s or in her 30s or 20s, someone who is working full-time, and their cost of living increase is different from a senior's cost of living increase, because if you're 70 years old, you're much more likely to have high health care costs than if you're 30 years old. So when we figured historically in this country, we do Consumer Price Index W, wages, CPI-W. It's based on a 30 or a 40 or a 50-year-old who's working full-time, their cost of living. We're not basing it on a senior citizen's cost of living who consumes, if you will, much higher health care, who has much higher health care costs. That's what the legislation Senator Merkley, Senator Mikulski, and I are working on, CPI-E, Consumer Price Index for the elderly, reflecting their real costs. Why should seniors' cost of living adjustment be based on a 30-year-old's cost of living instead of a 70-year-old's cost of living. That's clearly why we need to change. We also know another thing about Social Security, Mr. President. We know that some conservative politicians in this institution, mostly Republicans, not quite entirely, we know some conservative politicians in this institution want to change the Consumer Price Index the other way, to make it even smaller. And we, 2 years in a row there was no increase, no COLA, no Consumer Price Index increase, no extra dollars to keep up with burgeoning health care costs for seniors. We know that didn't happen for 2 years. There are people in this institution, many of whom have never really supported Social Security to begin with all that much, frankly, to be honest, who want to see a smaller cost of living adjustment. It's something called chain CPI, and I won't go into the details about how it works, but it's basically saying to seniors, whatever you're spending money on, if you're buying apples, for instance, then you could buy bananas because my staff says bananas cheaper. We had an argument about that, whether bananas really are cheaper per calorie and per weight and all that. But nonetheless, Mr. President, they're saying to seniors, under this change CPI thing that some conservative think tank, some corporate-funded insurance company, drug company-funded think tank, I assume, came up with this bizarre idea, change CPI, saying to seniors, well, you can pay less for things because you can do substitutions of food, from beef to chicken, or from apples to bananas, or from something to something, and save money. Well, most seniors have already made those substitutions in their buying habits because they're already squeezed because the cost of living adjustment hasn't really kept up with their health care costs. That's the whole point. So instead of, Mr. President, and I'll wrap up, instead of our moving to reduce the cost of living adjustment, going to this chained Consumer Price Index, chained CPI, we should move away from CPI-W, based on wages, to CPI-E versus meaning what elderly people's costs really are as their health care goes up. It will mean several $100s in the monthly benefit that a senior receives. And let me give you those numbers, and then I'll wrap up, Mr. President. For the average person who retired in 1985, that person would get about an $887 increase if it was the way that Senator Merkley and Senator Menendez and I want to change Social Security. That CPI, that increase would then go up a little bit over time so that seniors would, in fact, be able to keep up with their health care costs. That's the importance of this change. That's the importance of our legislation, Mr. President. We can't go the other way, CPI chain. And I know that last point I'll make, Mr. President, is that conservatives that don't much like Social Security, these conservatives, some of them are presidential candidates, I might add, they will say, well, we can't afford this. Well, Mr. President, the budget deficit's not because of Social Security. It's a bunch of whole other things. Social Security is not part of this budget deficit. We know how to do minor things to fix Social Security long term and take care of seniors and their health care needs and their increased costs. Mr. President, I yield the floor and suggest the absence of a quorum.